Hey guys, tonight we're diving straight into the sparkling, golden, somewhat musty world of London's ultra-wealthy in the 1900s. Picture an era before air conditioning existed, but after the creation of truly uncomfortable corsets and hats so enormous they required their own spot on the bus. This is a place where one dinner party costs more than what you earn in a year, and people hire other people to wipe the dust from their shoes and, sometimes from their egos. Before we get started, do me a small favour, hit like, maybe subscribe, but only if you genuinely like this kind of historical sleep time content. Leave a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. Alright, lower the lights, turn on the fan for that gentle background noise and get really comfortable. Let's take a moment. Have you ever pondered the important questions? How many staff members were needed to prepare a single bath? How many monocles can one person possess before it becomes concerning? Did wealthy people ever wash their own clothes, or was that against the law? And honestly, how did anyone get through a 6-course Edwardian meal without a phone to distract them? Because right now you, yes, you, are about to be transported into a world where afternoon tea is a blood sport, social advancement is practically an Olympic discipline, and the only thing scarier than the dentist is mistakenly grabbing the wrong fork at dinner. Congratulations, you've just awakened in 1900s London wearing silk nightclothes nestled under a mountain of eiderdown with a strangely intense desire for caviar and a concerning absence of central heating. Welcome to the privileged life. Or at minimum the costly one. It's morning and you wake not to the soft sunlight, but to the soft knocking of your private maid. She's arrived to draw your curtains, wind your timepieces, and likely remind you that you've never made your own bed in your whole existence. The linens are Egyptian cotton, the pillows are filled with something rumoured to be swan feathers, and there's a breakfast tray next to you, carried up 3 flights by a servant who now possesses the leg muscles of an ancient athlete. You open your eyes to the world's most luxurious pillow, and a comforter. So plush. It's like sleeping in a cloud. If clouds cost as much as a tiny nation and sometimes smelled faintly of lavender and inherited wealth, the ceiling overhead isn't merely a ceiling, but an artwork. Painted angels, gold leafing, and perhaps a tiny spider who's also enjoying his finest life in upper-class society. You stretch, but not too vigorously. You don't want to crease your nightgown, which is crafted from silk so delicate it likely included a caution notice. While you debate whether to rise or just fake sleep until midday, your maid is already moving about, drawing back thick brocade drapes. The sunlight pours in, reflecting off the crystal bottles, gilded frames, and, for mysterious reasons, a statue of Julius Caesar, who's witnessed some things. You detect the subtle sounds of the household stirring, servants hurrying below stairs, the far-off clang of copper cookware, and someone in the corridor quietly debating whose responsibility it is to shine the railing. Your feet haven't met the chilly floor in years, partially because the carpet is so deep you could lose a foot in it, but mainly because you have slippers positioned by the bed. Not ordinary slippers, velvet monogrammed and likely worth more than your initial automobile. A polite cough from your valet alerts you that breakfast has arrived, beautifully presented on a silver platter. There's fresh tea in a porcelain cup so fragile you're scared to breathe near it, a soft-boiled egg standing upright, and toast so flawlessly cut you wonder if measuring tools were used. You consider your day. No alarm clocks present. Your agenda is maintained by an actual person who recalls more anniversaries than you do. If you want to learn what's planned for the morning, simply check the handwritten schedule on the silver tray right beside the imported preserve and the berries that likely departed the greenhouse just past midnight. And what an agenda! A kind reminder that you have absolutely nothing to accomplish except exist, be delightful, and maybe dodge your great-aunt at breakfast, since she's famous for launching into theatrical recitations of 19th century verse. Before midday, you take a nibble of toast and look out at the grounds, which is not exactly a garden as much as an elaborate living monument to the idea of because I can marble water features, peacocks parading like lesser nobility, and a small crew of gardeners who seem to be cutting the grass with shears. You momentarily wonder what it would be like to trim a lawn, then sensibly decide to let that existential worry fade. As you drink your tea, the housekeeper enters gracefully, quietly assessing the room temperature with a swift look and a degree of competence that would impress a space mission control crew. She's present to confirm the fire is at exactly the proper level of warm radiance and that the vase of flowers on your dresser has not transformed into, as it did last week, a subtle health hazard. You stretch once more for theatrical flair. You think about summoning for a bath, a wardrobe change, or maybe just for the pleasure of hearing the chime. There is no rush. Time operates differently in a residence this massive. If you linger long enough, someone will likely stop by to inform you that you have a carriage outing arranged, or that your breakfast is cooling. Or, in a genuinely urgent situation, that you are scheduled for a trim, which, in 1900s London signifies enduring 45 minutes of courteous, uncomfortable conversation about the climate. And so you recline, surrounded by comfort, enveloped in prosperity, wondering whether to greet the day or just savour another 5 minutes in the realm of cushions. After all, why hurry? In this universe, even time itself must wait until you're prepared. Let's discuss getting dressed. Getting dressed in 1900 isn't quite an activity as much as it is a group endeavour. For gentlemen, it's a display of starched neckbands, silk neckties and cufflinks worth more than most people's residences. For ladies, it's corsets, undergarments, and a personal maid who understands more about your foundation garments than your own partner. By the time you're clothed, you've expended more energy than a contemporary fitness class, and you still need to select a hat. Your day doesn't start with a quick closet search. Instead, it's a ceremony as holy as a monarch's crowning and twice as nerve-wracking. You wake to discover your clothing for the day already chosen, arranged by someone who must predict whether you'll want to appear effortlessly majestic or prepared for countryside hunting. But never, ever, informal Friday. There are sufficient layers here to endure an Arctic journey, or, at minimum, a gentle English mist. If you're a gentleman, your valet stands prepared, looking only somewhat frightened that you'll select the wrong necktie and destroy the family's standing for 3 lifetimes. First up, the undergarment. Clean linen, suspiciously pale. How does anyone maintain these spotless over that? A shirt so heavily pressed it could serve as emergency protection, followed by pants with a fold sharp enough to conduct minor operations. Next come the braces, because elastic hasn't been created yet and the style authorities are monitoring. Now for the vest. Brocade, velvet or silk, depending on whether it's Tuesday or the 3rd, Thursday, following Michaelmas, or whatever mysterious system your manservant is following. Then a necktie carefully tied in a knot so intricate it could be used to anchor a vessel in a storm. By this stage, you're beginning to sweat. But don't fret. There's still a morning jacket, a dress coat, or conceivably both. It's like constructing a suit of protection made completely of textiles, fasteners, and the faint scent of fragrance. Naturally, your footwear must be buffed to a reflective shine, which is thankfully not your responsibility. You have a man for that, and potentially a reserve man, in case the first man's facial hair is inadequately styled. Cufflinks are fastened, hair is groomed with military exactness, and a pocket watch chain hangs stylishly, just in case anyone questions that you have somewhere significant to be, or at least somewhere significant to linger. For ladies, the procedure is even more complex. First, the shift, a soft linen undergarment to separate your skin from the armour to follow. Then the corset, designed by someone with a vendetta against breathing. Your maid is a specialist, tightening you in with the kind of strength usually reserved for restringing a sports racket. You discover the true definition of waist compression, while also getting a quick lesson in regulated respiration. Next comes the underskirt, sometimes 2 or 3, giving your dress that distinctive bell-shaped outline. Hoop frames are optional, but strongly suggested if you want to topple over small furniture. As you rotate over all this, you add the primary dress, silk, taffeta, or velvet, decorated with ribbons, lace, and fasteners so microscopic they require a team of expert craftsmen and potentially a magnifying glass. Your arms are forced into sleeves so tight you question if blood flow is essential. Shoes are delicate, pointed, and created by someone who obviously despised feet. Jewellery arrives next. Pearls, diamonds, and maybe a pin large enough to be classified as a small blade. Gloves, elbow length, because the appearance of bare forearms might give someone a shock. A cameo at the throat, a tiny purse, a delicate cloth just in case you need to sneeze in a socially proper fashion. And now the headwear. For men, it's a selection between top hat, bowler, or, if you're feeling defiant, a straw boater. For women, it's a floral monstrosity requiring engineering support, a collection of fake birds or possibly a live weasel. If you're feeling progressive, a hat pin the size of a blade secures your construction, and you try not to imagine what would occur. In a strong breeze, you stand before the looking glass magnificent, overlayered and already somewhat drained. But you look appropriate, getting dressed. In 1900s, London wasn't about ease. It was about position, display, and the perpetual fear of being surpassed by a neighbour's collar details. Ready or not, you're equipped to face the day just as soon as you recover your breath. Now, let's discuss breakfast suitable for monarchs. Downstairs, breakfast is less grab and rush, and more sit and be observed. The table is arranged with more utensils than you can recognise. A uniformed footman stands close by, ready to serve your tea or assess your toast buttering approach. Everything tastes faintly of inherited money and just potentially the hierarchy system. You descend the impressive staircase trailing a faint mist of powder and the silent worry that you might mistakenly sit in the incorrect seat again. The dining room is less a room and more a shrine to buffed mahogany, ceiling to floor windows and paintings of ancestors who look like they haven't digested a meal since the Bonaparte conflicts. Your seat is pulled out by a footman whose expression hovers somewhere between worship and slight terror. Sitting at the table's end feels a bit like presiding over a very courteous interrogation. The table itself is a war zone of white cloth, cut glass, crystal, and so many forks that selecting the correct one becomes an act of bravery. There are dishes for eggs, dishes for fish, a distinct dish for toast, and somewhere in the arrangement a puzzling silver cover hiding something you're reluctant to inquire about. It's less a breakfast table and more an obstacle course for the undercaffeinated. Your breakfast arrives not simultaneously, but in waves, like an opera, only with more dairy. First, there's porridge made from oats cultivated on an estate your family likely forgot they possessed. A footman serves it from a silver vessel, and you try to look like you value the delicate consistency, even though it mostly tastes like wet aristocratic grit. You drink tea, but not before the butler raises the pot and asks, "Will sir need milk, or is today a citrus day?" You're tempted to say, "Astonish me," just to see what occurs, but the danger is too substantial. Next there's eggs, soft-boiled, poached or scrambled to within an inch of their existence, depending on the day and the temperament of the chef. Each egg arrives in its own miniature cup, its top neatly removed as if by a surgeon with a complaint. Soldiers? No, not the military variety, but little strips of flawlessly cut toast are positioned with military exactness. You are expected to dip, not scoop. Scooping is for barbarians. You wonder what would occur if you requested an omelette. The footman's left eyebrow quivers imperceptibly as if to say, "Not in this household, my good sir." There's kippers for the courageous, smoked salmon for the stylish, and grilled kidneys for the deeply devoted. You may or may not be certain which one you've just consumed, but you're confident it was prepared by someone who hasn't made eye contact with you since 1892. Everything is flavoured with a dash of nervousness about proper manners. The toast comes in a silver holder, never a stack, always a holder so that it cools to the perfect temperature. For dental crises, jam and marmalade are presented in crystal containers with spoons so miniature they seem intended for feeding forest animals. Heaven protect you if you reach for the incorrect spread. Entire family bonds have been destroyed over less. You spread your jam with the breakfast blade, but not the fish blade and absolutely not the cheese blade. There are regulations. No one recalls why conversation at the breakfast table is carefully controlled, like the sugar in your tea. Light, harmless topics, only climate, the peculiarities of the mail service, the dependability of last night's footman. Anything weightier, politics, finances, feelings, waits until after the third cup of tea, or is exiled entirely until next holiday season. Your family exchanges clever remarks about the garden or, if things get truly exciting, the dependability of the egg vendor. Throughout all of this, the staff linger quietly, ready to refill, remove or substitute any item that even considers being empty. You don't clear your own dish, heaven forbid. You simply nod, and it disappears as if by sorcery. If you drop your napkin, another materializes. If you sigh at your empty teacup, it refills. If you seem bothered by your spoon, a fresh one is presented, and you never quite know where it originates from. And when you're finally satisfied, or at least pretending to be, you stand. The staff descend like a well-trained flock of magpies, clearing away any proof you ever ate at all. Breakfast is concluded, and you're ready for the next challenge, the bath, the brush, and the ever-present worry of picking out your hat. Let's discuss morning routines. Bathing is a ceremony that involves multiple buckets, 2 servants, and a hope that the hot water doesn't disappear. Hairbrushing, not your responsibility. Someone else handles that too. Afterwards, you're sprayed with the sort of fragrance that could eliminate a small creature at 10 paces. And now, freshly cleaned, you're ready to not lift a finger for the rest of the morning. Welcome to the 1900s luxury bath, a procedure less like washing and more like launching a small, labour-intensive spa experience in your own marble-covered bathroom. Your tub sits in the middle of a room so impressive it has its own echo. The floor is tiled, the walls are panelled, and there's a potted fern in the corner that's witnessed more gossip than most publications. There's no running hot water yet, obviously. This is the Edwardian era, not a futuristic story. So your bath is filled bucket by steaming, bucket by 2 men, whose forearms suggest they could triumph in a rowing competition with just a ladle. The water is poured in with the gravity generally reserved for a sacred rite, or the uncorking of the first bottle of champagne at a wedding. An intricate mechanism is in place to maintain the precise water temperature. Too hot, and you risk a scalding. Too chilly, and you might as well jump in the Thames yourself. Sometimes a footman checks the temperature with a thermometer, but usually it is simply a matter of accepted custom and superstition. You settle into the enormous tub, which makes you wonder why it features clawed feet. Perhaps they are there so it can make an escape if the household staff ever forms a union. Soap is provided, but it is no ordinary soap. It is French milled, scented with lavender and wrapped in 3 layers of paper imported from overseas. Washing your own hair is a chore fit for servants too. You remain perfectly still as someone carefully pours a jug of water over your head, taking care to prevent the water from running down your back and causing a small but deep sense of unease. The shampoo is a blend of fine oils and essences with a fragrance that lasts for hours, accompanying you like a floral phantom. Towels, warmed near the fireplace, are as plush as a cloud and nearly as costly. Your luxurious bathrobe is ready, hanging on a gold-plated hook that likely cost more than an average year's pay. You exit the tub, and immediately a servant appears, as if summoned by the sound of your damp feet on the tile. They envelop you, dry you, and gently slide slippers onto your feet so subtly that you barely notice the act. At this stage, you have not so much taken a bath as been ceremonially presented to yourself. Now begins the next phase. Hair. Whether you possess a spectacular mane or the beginnings of a regrettable comb-over, your hair is not your concern. A maid or valet arrives with an assortment of brushes, combs, and a mysterious bottle of tonic promising shine, vigour, and maybe a cure for despair. Your hair is meticulously brushed 100 times, as is the expectation, and then styled in keeping with the current trends. Men must endure a quick trim of their moustache, often with a straight razor wielded by an assistant who knows all your indiscretions. Women have ribbons, delicate pins, or entire decorations resembling fruit baskets, all precisely placed. A stray hair is treated as a major crisis, and now the spritz, perfume or cologne selected to suit the mood of the day, or at the very least to overcome the lingering scent of boiled eggs from breakfast. One servant applies a subtle hint to the wrists and behind the ears. The other steps back and sprays you from a safe distance, ensuring you are fragrant enough to attend any function, repel unwanted insects, and quietly assert your standing among the other socialites. As this is happening, another servant silently polishes your footwear, folds your handkerchief, and verifies you have the proper number of gloves for the afternoon. If you are feeling particularly competitive, you might engage in a brief, bragging match with a cousin or sibling, whose bath was hottest, whose soap the most exotic, who had the most buckets delivered without a single drop spilled. Now, perfectly clean, combed and scented, you are ready to venture into society, or more accurately, to strut through your own residence, confirming that everyone notices you have survived another morning of elite cleanliness. You will not be performing any manual task for the remainder of the morning. After all, exhaustion is a badge of honour, and you have just completed the luxury equivalent of a triathlon. The next activity involves surveying your sprawling estate, where every room exists to remind you just how wealthy you truly are. Your home is not merely large, it is excessive. There are more rooms than you can count, and at least 2 that you are not permitted to enter without supervision. Every antique object has a history, usually detailing its astronomical price or which minor royal once sneezed near it. It is less a home and more a minor kingdom with plumbing, the kind of place where the echo of your footsteps takes a full 3 seconds to return. The grand entry hall alone could easily host a fencing competition, a children's chorus, and a fox hunt simultaneously. There are tapestries older than certain nations, and marble statues of forgotten individuals whom you are absolutely expected to reference at dinner parties. Every passageway is adorned with art, portraits of grim ancestors who gaze down with the perpetual disapproval of people who had never heard of deodorant. You do not walk down these halls. You drift, ideally, with a servant following close behind, carrying a cushion, a decorative shawl, or simply moral support. Your bedroom, it is officially a chamber suite, comes complete with a separate dressing room, a sitting area, and a curious small door that leads to a staircase no one ever discusses. The bed is draped, intricately carved, and large enough to sleep an entire squadron of cavalry. You occupy the centre, surrounded by more pillows than a bridal registry. The mattress is so soft you may have actually lost an antique beneath it. Below there is the library, naturally, with shelves rising from floor to ceiling, filled with books you have never opened but which provide a distinguished backdrop. As you pretend to be engrossed in Plato, a ladder on wheels slides along the upper shelves, useful for dramatic sighing or fleeing tiresome relatives. Tucked away in the corner, a globe is so large it requires its own dedicated servant to spin it. And then there is the drawing room, an elegant snare designed to display riches and host conversations that perpetually verge on being passive-aggressive. Here, tea is served with an ample side of judgment. Guests perch on antique chairs, which essentially means sitting is strictly discouraged. The fireplace is always lit, even in mid-July, and the fragrance of lavender furniture polish lingers like the spectral scent of financial worry. If you are male, the study serves as your refuge. Dark wood, leather upholstery, and just enough cigar smoke to prevent the walls from collapsing. You peruse the newspapers, compose correspondence with a quill you pretend to know how to use, and occasionally practice your thoughtful for the next time someone mentions the stock market. If you are female, your boudoir is a pale pink maze of mirrors, perfume bottles, and tiny boxes holding even smaller boxes that contain jewellery you forgot you owned. The ballroom. The ballroom. It is rarely utilised for anything practical, but it is an essential space for being observed not doing anything important. Chandeliers larger than actual horses dangle from ceilings painted with angels and past mistakes. The floor is waxed to a dangerous degree of slickness, which is convenient, because falling with dramatic flair during a waltz is surprisingly beneficial for social advancement. Now, while you are the owner of all this, you do not actually manage it. That falls under the jurisdiction of the housekeeper, a woman with the strategic organisational abilities of a military general and the power to silence a room with a single glance. She knows where every item belongs, when every single candle needs replacing, and the full story behind the scandal that unfolded in the Green Sitting Room in 1872. Should she vanish for more than 30 seconds, the entire household staff collapses like a souffle in a thunderstorm that drags on too long. There are also whole wings of the house reserved solely for guests you do not particularly care for but must impress. These rooms are kept in a state of constant readiness. Sheets are pressed, flowers are rotated, and secrets are securely locked away. You may never set foot in them, but they are crucial to your image as someone who can afford to pretend they enjoy company. And then there are the mystery doors, small, locked spaces distributed throughout the property. Some lead to winding staircases, others to broom closets. One, possibly, opens into Narnia. But you know better than to ask questions. Questions are for people who rent their accommodations. So, yes, your home is magnificent, drafty, impossible to navigate without a diagram, and quite eerie after the sun sets. But it is your domain, or, at least, it is owned by someone in your lineage whose portrait hangs in the billiards room, clutching a pheasant and a long-held grudge. Let us now move past the decor and turn our attention to the true centre of authority in the house, the butler. A man with a set of keys, strong opinions, and likely a private score to settle. The butler is everywhere and nowhere, directing the household activities like an incredibly polite, intensely critical general. His grasp of your daily schedule is so complete that it is possible he knows when you will need the bathroom before you do. He does not walk. He moves with a silent glide like an impeccably dressed phantom in perfectly shined shoes. One moment he is completely absent, the next he is right behind you, holding a tray you did not request with the exact item you were about to ask for. You suspect he has cultivated some form of sixth sense, perhaps developed at a secret finishing academy where they teach emotional foresight and how to stare without ever blinking. You do not know his given name, no one does. It may have been lost to the passing of time, or perhaps it has simply never been uttered aloud to you. He is known only as Jenkins or Cromwell or some equally formal butler-like name, a designation passed down like a hereditary title or a family curse. He has been a fixture of the house for so long that you are fairly certain he existed before the plumbing was installed. The butler operates the house with quiet, terrifying efficiency. The footmen show him deference, and the maids obey his silent command. Even the formidable housekeeper, who once reduced a stable boy to tears just by moving the silverware, lowers her voice in his presence. He never raises his voice. He has no need to. He merely lifts one eyebrow, and furniture shifts itself out of sheer dread. He understands the household finances better than you do. He knows exactly how much you spend on soap, when the wine cellar was last inventoried, and which guest has a tendency to pocket teaspoons. He keeps meticulous records of every cigar you have ever enjoyed, every dinner party you have ever hosted, and every occasion your cousin, Viscount Arthur, was discovered sleeping in the conservatory next to a duck. If a crisis arises, be it plumbing-related, social, or emotional, he appears not with any show of feeling. Emotion is for the lower servants. He provides napkins, immediate solutions, and, when absolutely necessary, sherry. Always the superior sherry. You have never thought to ask how he distinguishes the superior sherry from the merely respectable sherry. You simply accept that he has the knowledge. He knows. The butler also manages the flow of information. Who is allowed to enter, who is offered tea, and who is gently but firmly ushered toward the tradesman's entrance. He acts as your filter, your personal firewall, your ultimate defense against the sheer chaos of everyday aristocratic life. If someone wishes to speak with you, they must address him first, and sometimes they never manage to get past him at all. When guests arrive, it is the butler who announces them, always in the same perfectly calm tone, as if delivering the entirely predictable results of a small weather report. He never expresses judgment out loud, but you can deduce the entire family history of the arriving visitor in the subtle delay before he pronounces their name. And he is above all else discreet. He knows everything, your patterns of sleep, your various dietary peculiarities, that incident in Vienna that remains strictly unmentioned. And he says absolutely nothing. He has been a witness to numerous scandals, whispered romances, and a cousin fleeing a duel while still in his dressing gown, and not once has he so much as cracked a smile. But do not be mistaken. Should you attempt to rearrange the household schedule, host a gathering without his explicit knowledge, or heaven forbid rearrange the labels on the decanters, you will experience the full weight of his displeasure. He will not shout. He will not engage in argument. He will simply allow your entire day to silently unravel. The tea will arrive lukewarm, the toast will be faintly scorched, the carriage will be mysteriously delayed. You will be socially punished. It will be slow, deliberate, and delivered with terrifying accuracy. And yet, you are fond of him, because without him, nothing in your life functions. Not the morning meal, not the guests, not even the laundry service. He is the quiet motor that ensures the aristocratic pretense runs flawlessly. So, as you walk past the butler and he grants you the smallest, most restrained nod, be aware that you are highly favoured. You have earned a minute speck of his approval. You are worthy, at least for the day. Now let us proceed to the true arena of high society, the drawing room at 4 o'clock, where the tea is served hot and the gossip is served even hotter. Afternoon tea is not merely a light snack, it is a calculated social skirmish. There are strict rules, there are scones, and there are enough murmured slights to fill the pages of a Russian novel. Using the incorrect spoon might lead to a social or emotional recovery that lasts a lifetime. It starts at exactly 4 o'clock, not 3:59, not 4:01. The invitation stated tea, but it could have easily read, prepare for battle. You enter the drawing room outfitted for moderate combat. Lace, fine pearls, and an expression that communicates, I know exactly what you did last season, and I am prepared to pretend I do not, for now. The tea service is already arranged, gleaming and somewhat intimidating. A towering silver urn steams silently in the corner like an anxious dragon. The teacups are fragile, rimmed with gold and practically weightless, seemingly designed to shatter at the first sign of emotional weakness. You choose one carefully, acutely aware that your selection reveals everything about your lineage, your marriage prospects, and possibly your political leanings. You sit gingerly on a chair that is simultaneously too small and too expensive to support a normal human weight. Every surface in the room is polished to a flawless mirror finish, which is convenient, as it allows you to monitor who is whispering about whom without having to move your neck. The hostess greets you with a smile that could easily cut glass. She makes an elegant gesture toward the tiered platter of delicacies at the centre of the table, a glittering tower of tiny sandwiches, scones, and elaborate pastries that look structurally questionable. The sandwiches are naturally crustless, because crusts are for people who are familiar with manual labour. Cucumber is the safe choice, smoked salmon is the power move, and egg salad is the diplomatic disaster waiting to happen. Then come the scones. The scones. Light, airy, and holding centuries of colonial complexity. They are presented with clotted cream and jam in an arrangement that can ignite passionate regional disagreements. Do you spread the jam first, or the cream? Family feuds have begun over less important matters. You cast your die, draw a deep breath, and pretend you miss the soft intake of air from the woman across the way. The exchange of words starts up. It's mild things like the climate, how good the roses turned out this season, or if Lady Windermere's ankles actually showed during the fundraising picnic. But don't be fooled. Every remark is a challenge. Each little head tilt is calculated, pleasantries are loaded, and the simple chat is just the preliminary before somebody mentions a count from another country with a questionable background. You carefully drink your tea. It's scorching, bitter, and utterly required. The dairy product is added last, unless your goal is to look simple and charming, which gives you license to put it in first as a risky move. That's a real gamble. People have been banished to the countryside for smaller offences. Meanwhile, the attendant glides around silently, topping off the teacups and gathering up secrets with the precision of a government agent from the time period. He hears everything and remains quiet. A sharp man. Your hostess leans in to tell you something. Strictly between us, she says, which guarantees it will be passed on to 5 other individuals before the sun goes down. It concerns Lady Effington's 3rd son, and a story involving a governess, a musical instrument, and an unfortunate mix-up involving small preserved onions. You nod soberly. You plan to relay this later at your supper as though it came straight from the highest religious official. All of a sudden, someone brings up the event from the previous spring. The whole space tightens. A baked good is dropped, silverware jingles. You have no idea what the event was, but you stand ready to nod knowingly and fake a delicate sadness. It's the only way you survive. As the platter starts to empty, and sherry, purely for its supposed medicinal value, replaces the teapot, the flow of conversation mellows. You succeeded. Your social standing is safe. You didn't offend the host, improperly use an eating tool, or figuratively or literally spill any tea. But don't relax yet. Tomorrow's social call awaits. And next time, Lady Windermere will bring backup. Now let's move outside for a moment of fresh air and a highly public display of wealth. It's time for your afternoon carriage ride through the city. Travel isn't just about reaching a destination, it's about being observed going to that destination, ideally in a transport that's worth more than an average apartment building. You wave, you nod, you try to ignore the horse's apparent disdain for your headwear. Your coachman, whose high hat could be mistaken for a shelter for birds, assists you into your ride, which shines with freshly buffed metal and an atmosphere of unspoken critique. The wheels alone needed more attention last week than most people receive their whole lives. The interior is soft, plush, and extremely impractical for anyone tall, but that's unimportant. Appearing uncomfortable is part of the allure. Outside, the population stares, children gawk, merchants bow. Even the local birds seem to respect your financial standing. You aren't simply heading to the public grounds. You are declaring your presence there in grand, measured steps. Each rhythmic beat of the horse's hooves announces your high standing, your distinguished heritage, and your utter inability to function without personal assistance. You move through the upscale part of town, where the lanes are made of stone, the street lights glow faintly, and everyone acts as if they don't notice the odour. You acknowledge people you know, raise a gloved hand in greeting, and practice your most understated look, the one that says, "I know I'm ridiculously rich, but I'm also painfully aware of how even my facial structure is." The carriage slows down near the city park, where the upper crust meets to observe and be observed. This is less about moving and more about spectacle. You ensure the window treatments are drawn back just enough to reveal your outline, and you pretend not to see the lower gentry straining their necks to catch a glimpse of your leg cover. If they're fortunate, they might even spot a fashionable flicker of a stitched letter on your glove. Your horses, large and immaculate, are part of the exhibition. One is named after a titled nobleman, the other after a seriously high-priced gourmet cheese. They are trained to trot at the exact speed for maximum grace and minimal waste clean-up. The driver handles the reins with a serious sense of occasion, like he's guiding a royal event or perhaps trying to outrun the smell drifting from the fish stand you just passed. You study your social competitors with the intensity of a military planner. Lady Breckenridge's head covering is outrageously wide, Lord Tetherby seems to have polished his footwear with real effort, and someone's relation is driving their own carriage, which is so unsophisticated, you might as well faint on their behalf. The hierarchy of importance changes constantly, and one incorrect accessory could ruin months of careful social investment. It's not all perfect, naturally. There's the chance of an unexpected downpour, or an unkempt radical throwing a leaflet toward you, or worse, being stopped in traffic behind somebody with fewer than 6 horses. You hide your disgust behind a sunshade. And yes, technically, there's the ongoing threat of small-time crime or runaway vehicles. But that's why your footman rides positioned at the rear, primarily for protection and partially to glare at pedestrians who look too comfortable. He's also handy for quickly leaping off and fighting back a stray waterfowl with a decorative stick. Conversation during the trip is limited, mostly just nods, the occasional remark about how full the trees look this season, and coded comments about other carriages, such as, well, the Everinghams are out again. Your passenger pretends to be engrossed by the surroundings while subtly keeping score of who offered a bow and who acted like they didn't see you. Eventually you complete the circuit, having accomplished absolutely nothing except for being noticed, which in high-class society of the era is everything. You didn't break a sweat, but somehow you are drained. Being a decorative member of the elite is surprisingly strenuous. As you arrive back home, your footman opens the door, your coachman tips his hat, and you float back inside as if you just returned from defeating an entire empire. Now let's turn back inside to something even riskier than a public display, eating the midday meal with family members. While you are living in luxury, the domestic staff are already 3 hours into their day, moving at speed that could supply power to a small community. Their objective? Make your existence look effortless while quietly judging your preference for vests. To be clear, your morning routine, your bath, your neatly combed hair, your perfectly cooked egg. All of that required at least 6 people and a minor disregard for labour safety rules. The staff started working long before sunrise, sneaking through cold passages, tending the fireplaces, carrying pails of water and wondering for the 5th time this week why anybody needs 3 forks just to eat breakfast. Downstairs is a completely different universe. It's louder, hotter, and fueled by tea so potent it could remove finish from wood. The kitchen helper is already up to her elbows in dinnerware. The cook is shouting commands like a military leader holding a pastry. The head servant is polishing silver while mentally logging the location of every missing piece of handwear in the home. And the footman, he's halfway through a 12-hour shift that involves running up and down stairs in a jacket so tight he hasn't properly inhaled since the day before yesterday. Every moment on the upper floors is choreographed, refined, smooth and dignified, and every moment on the lower floors is organised disorder created to ensure that possibility. Rugs are beaten, sleeping areas are made with terrifying exactness, footwear is shined to a bright finish, and heaven help the cleaner who forgets to fold down the appropriate side of the blanket. There are signalling devices, so many signalling devices. Each space has one connected to a labelled wire board, like an antique communication system. When you call, it's a matter of chance. Will you want tea, the daily newspaper, or just someone to talk to? Because you feel a little sad? They race up, offer a polite smile, and disappear before you've even registered their presence. Quiet as felines, weary as phantoms, rank is everything. The butler reigns supreme, but the head housekeeper governs with strict rules and an unyielding demeanour. Female workers report to her, male assistants report to him. The kitchen staff only report to the cook, who reports to absolutely nobody, perhaps not even the monarch. And that's debatable. Everyone understands their position because leaving it, even by the width of a napkin, could cause an uproar that ends up in the next morning's paper. Despite the rigid structure, there's a full dramatic story unfolding in the servants' living areas. Hidden affections, long-standing disputes, a secret supply of cookies concealed behind the washing bucket. Somebody has been leaving after hours. Somebody else borrowed the gentleman's scent for an outing and is hoping no one notices. And all of this occurs right underneath your perfectly maintained flooring. The staff sleep in small beds in shared rooms that faintly smell of starch and quiet dissatisfaction. Privacy is non-existent. Time off is non-existent. If they're lucky, they'll get one afternoon off per week to walk in the park and pretend they're not utterly exhausted. But even then, there's an expected attire, because being seen in anything less than appropriate is enough to be labelled as difficult. They eat quickly, clean faster, and know every detail of what happens in the home. Every quiet discussion, every broken agreement to wed, every mysteriously vanished small spoon. They are the guardians of classified information, the observers of misbehaviour, and the actual mechanics that keep the large house operational. You may occupy the upper level, but they know what you're truly like when you assume nobody is looking. And yet most of them will continue to stay, because the work is dependable, because it's better than factory labour. Because in a strange way, there's dignity in mastering this environment, in knowing that the silver shines, the sleeping areas are perfect, and the visitors will be amazed at how simple it all seems. So the next time your tea arrives, steaming hot, your necktie is arranged just right, and your gloves are miraculously exactly where you left them. Remember, somewhere on the lower floor, someone is already 3 tasks ahead of you, sipping cool tea and silently wondering how you possibly got preserve on the ceiling. Now let's change focus from silent dedication to high society, where this evening's social time includes fancy dresses, whispers, and a formal meal with more forks than common sense. Every evening is another social event. There is dancing, bubbly wine, and the ever-present fear that you'll forget someone's name or accidentally marry a distant relative. Your feet hurt, your funds are fine, and the invitations never stop arriving. The social calendar isn't just full, it's strained to capacity. A non-stop sequence of parties, formal dances, and midday meals with seating charts more complicated than international peace talks. If you skip one, you're ignored. If you attend them all, you risk a painful joint condition. You exist in a state of continuous polite fatigue. Tonight's function, a formal fundraiser in support of some noble cause, though no one can clearly recall what. The crucial part is that Lady Maltravers will be present, and she once hinted she might leave a fancy headpiece to anyone who can finish the formal dance without passing out. The consequences are significant. Your carriage pulls up to the lavish home of whichever distant family member is hosting, and you are immediately hit by the scent of flowers, fragrances, and barely concealed rivalry. Attendants in hairpieces open the doors with matching precision, and you glide inside, trying not to stumble over your own clothing hem or someone else's small pet. Inside, the hanging lights sparkle like judging observers, and the grand room hums with rumours disguised as casual chat. The air is heavy with anticipation and hair preparation. You accept a glass of champagne from a passing tray, unsure whether the proper action is to drink it, swirl it, or simply use it as a device to look occupied. The first dance starts, and the musicians begin a slow, emotional dance so intense it could bring rain. You are paired with someone who claims to have royal lineage and the verbal skills of a boiled root vegetable. You turn, you nod. You attempt not to step on anybody's trailing garment, especially not Lady Ashcroft's, which seems to have its own pull of gravity. Between dances, you're trapped by a wealthy woman with strong opinions on fruit preserves. You nod wisely and offer a neutral comment, yes, preserves, while mentally retreating into the safe fantasy of falling over on purpose just to get away. A server appears with a tray of appetizers that look like small architectural designs and taste like old furniture covering. You consume two to be gracious and instantly regret both. A public disagreement is brewing near the punch display. Someone's niece arrived with the wrong older woman as escort. Gasps move through the room like soft thunder. You make a mental note to casually mention it tomorrow, ideally with just the right combination of worry and amusement. You slip out to the outdoor area for a breath of air and find yourself surrounded by others also pretending to require air. Out here, secrets are exchanged like playing pieces. Who's secretly promised to wed? Who's secretly in financial trouble? Who's secretly growing whiskers? It's all extremely sensitive. Back inside, the hostess declares a group activity. The absolute horror. It's some kind of period game involving fabric strips, covered eyes, and forced laughter. You participate because refusing would brand you as a gloomy outsider. You survive with your respect mostly intact, and only one minor bruise from a badly judged formal bow. Later in the evening, as the string ensemble switches to something mildly inappropriate by a famous composer, guests begin to drift away. You collect your shawl, offer your departures, and endure 10 minutes of fake cheek kisses and quiet promises to visit each other next week, which everyone knows means never, unless I'm desperate. Back in your carriage, you take off your shoes with a sound that's half relief, half feeling of impending doom. Tomorrow brings another invitation, another ensemble, another carefully executed slide into the confusion of high society social maneuvering. You didn't select this way of life, but you did formally accept the invitation. Now let's move into something even more dangerous than the dance floor. The arena of courtship and arranged marriages where true feeling may be secondary but wealth is completely essential. It's dinner hour, and you're about to face a multi-hour attack of meats, sweet moulded dishes, and unknown foreign sauces. You're ready with silverware, manners, and the hope that you won't accidentally consume something that was living a couple of hours prior. You've been getting ready all day, emotionally, physically, spiritually, for this. A formal period dinner isn't only about the meal, it's about form, about posture, about the display, and flawless pronunciation of dishes you can't write, much less easily digest. Your formal invitation specified 7 o'clock precisely. You arrive at 6:59 because showing up at 7 means you're behind schedule, and arriving at 6:58 means you're newly rich. The eating area is illuminated by candles and intimidating. The table extends so far you're not sure if the person at the far end is a relative or a decorative figure. Silver sparkles, porcelain softly hits against other pieces. The decorative flower arrangement seems to have a personality. Your place setting has no fewer than 9 forks, each one threatening to reveal your lack of social training. You select one randomly and immediately regret the choice. The initial dish is a liquid meal, which is fine, except it arrives at a temperature usually reserved for liquid rock. You sip tentatively, pretending not to notice the small drop of moisture forming on your forehead. The footman, sensing a weak point, immediately fills your serving bowl again. Next comes the seafood offering. It's stylishly presented and covered in a liquid that might be alcohol, or it might be regret. You attempt to recall if the seafood fork is the one with the curved edge, or the one shaped like a tiny 3-pronged symbol of anxiety. You venture a guess. The head servant blinks once, slowly, and you know you made a mistake. Conversation flows as carefully as the thick, rich, and sometimes best avoided gravy. You're asked your thoughts on theatre, international sales, and the recent public argument involving a nobleman, a large bird, and a misplaced eye accessory. You reply with head movements and vague agreements, attempting to focus on the cooked fowl dish you've just been served, which looks like it could spring off the plate and run away. You force a smile. You chew. You hope. By the 5th course, the wine is working its effect. You no longer care what you are eating, and your confidence with the silverware is becoming reckless. You grab the thin vegetable holder with a dramatic gesture that could earn applause or a formal challenge. The man next to you discusses property transfer taxes with the same seriousness most people reserve for life-saving medical procedures. At some point, someone suggests a formal drink offering. You stand, glass in hand, unsure whether you are honouring the ruler, the chef, or the concept of digestive distress. The speech is lengthy, the clapping is polite, and the dessert is delayed. As a result, when the sweet dish finally appears, it's covered in fire. You try not to react. This is considered normal. Fire is just flavour, apparently. You've now reached the section dedicated to milk products, which smells like something that should be handled with special coverings. Your neighbour offers you a piece with the enthusiasm of someone distributing priceless family objects. You accept it, primarily to be polite, and wash it down with a strong alcoholic drink capable of resetting your entire family tree. Sweet wine follows, then a hot beverage, then a thin confection that seems oddly menacing, like the final challenge of the evening. You're full, confused, and not completely sure how you ended up with spreadable food on your cuff. When the meal finally concludes, the women move to the sitting room to talk about clothing, relations, and the deeper meanings of embroidered work. The men remain at the table, where spirits are poured and tobacco is lit with the manner of men who know they're about to lose money playing cards. As you rise to depart, you realise you survived 12 dishes, 3 minor social errors, and 1 potential contamination. You are the winner. And now, as you sway into the sitting room, still gripping a napkin like a symbol of surrender, it's time to talk about finding a spouse. Not your own situation, of course, just everyone else's. Strategically, every social appearance is an opportunity to display expensive jewellery, fancy feathers, and long gowns that require a small staff to prevent them from catching fire on the nearest decorative candle. It's not just clothes, it's competitive spending. You don't just dress, you are assembled. Your clothes are less of a closet and more of a safe, guarded by a personal attendant with nerves of iron and opinions stronger than your morning tea. Today's casually lavish look, which amounts to £17 of fine cloth, imported fibre from a foreign country, and a hair ornament that technically violates local bird protection regulations. You begin the process with multiple layers, undergarments first, then a tightly pulled stiff body garment until your spine considers submitting a formal complaint. A hip enhancement is fastened on to improve your graceful curves, which is code for you now take up twice the space and can't sit without help. Then comes the main garment itself, lowered over your head like a religious rite. There is fabric movement, there is adjustment, there is clothing construction so detailed it could qualify as light architecture. For the men, things are only slightly less awful. A formal coat that groans ominously at the shoulder seams. A stiff shirt so starched it could walk out on its own. The necktie. Folding it is an elaborate skill, involving reflective surfaces, silent requests, and the unspoken fear of unevenness. And I feel bad for you if your vest doesn't match your gloves yet again. Once dressed, you add accessories, and by adding accessories we mean you are arming yourself. Jewels are selected not for attractiveness, but for the dramatic impact. Large, tooth-sized diamonds, green stones that could guide ships, white pearls woven into long strands capable of being used as ropes. There is no such thing as too much, only not quite enough to make a social rival cry. You put on long gloves made from some unfortunate animal's soft underside and choose a handheld folding fan. Ivory if you want to appear modest, mother of pearl if you are feeling provocative. Fans are vital. They don't just cool you, they communicate. A quick movement means boredom. A flicker means secret information. A sharp closing means someone's about to be socially dismissed. Footwear is optional, really, since it will never be seen under a lot of fabric. Still, you wear soft shoes decorated with silver thread, delicate, uncomfortable, and certain to fall apart by the end of the night. Which is fine because your footman carries a replacement pair. Naturally, your final step, scented product, not a small amount, not a light spray, a thick mist. The perfume should arrive in a space before you do and stay present for hours and after. It's flowery, has a hint of citrus, and subtly recalls riches, authority, and an eagerness to engage in a duel over the propriety of gloves. Once you are dressed, you proceed down the staircase with the slow, grand movement of an iceberg, keenly aware that every facet of your presence is under scrutiny by the household staff, the feline, and quite possibly the phantom of your ancestor who succumbed to corset-related internal injuries. You need to step with grace, glide with sophistication, and most crucially, avoid perspiration. Sweating is reserved for the common folk and the performers at this kind of gathering. Your style is the initial move in a much bigger contest. You arrive and immediately start sizing up the competition. Someone else chose feathers, yours reach higher. Another wore jewels, yours are inherited. Someone arrived in an outdated style. They are beneath your notice. You exchange pleasantries like fencing partners lunging with foils, offering praise laced with malice. My, how daring of you to wear scarlet so late in the year. Isn't that neckpiece very much like the one sold after the Duchess's financial ruin? Every upward turn of the lips is a battleground, every fleeting look a conflict. You remain rigid throughout the meal, adjusting your neckline exactly 1.2 text blouse commands every 15 minutes to preserve your visual command. You only pretend to sip your clear soup while angling your ring hand just so, to catch the candlelight and ignite everyone else's resentment. Because here, wealth isn't a private matter. It's a procession, and you are the main attraction, the musical ensemble, and the fireworks display. Now we shift to the gentle close of the day where, after all the showing off, the feasting, and the fake mirth, you are finally permitted to drop into a bed spacious enough to require its own location identifier. The social calendar is a mortal combat played out in lace and gemstones. You're not merely greeting acquaintances, you are planning associations, exchanging family secrets, and if successful, securing a spouse with a noble rank and an excellent portfolio of coal assets. Welcome to the season. A multi-month social pairing event, disguised as a refined flurry of outdoor receptions, midday meals and masked dances. If you possess youth, a title, or are even just vaguely eligible for marriage, you are expected to be at every single event, smile until your facial muscles seize up and pretend you're not actively stalking a partner with solid finances. Like a well-dressed predator in silk, young women are introduced to society with the force of a projectile. At the monarch's formal reception, you bow so low your joints ache while being appraised like cattle by anyone with an inheritance and an eyeglass. From that point forward, you are available. Not in an emotional sense, not mentally, but in the sense that your relatives are very keen to secure a marital gift that includes land, horses, and ideally a manor with only minimal moisture issues. The objective? Marry into a higher standing or at the same level, never below. Moving down the social ladder is only acceptable if your intended owns a shipping business or at least has a relative with a lesser title and a joint ailment. Your hours are spent practicing social sparring. You must laugh at all the appropriate jokes and ask all the proper questions. Oh, your family runs rock quarries, how entrepreneurial, and never ever suggest you have convictions. Beliefs are dangerous. You are there to shimmer, not to converse. Evening dances carry a unique tension. Every dance is a political negotiation. The turning dance is for flirting, the group dance for bargaining, the card game is for desperation. You must recall names, faces, family scandals, and whether Lord Harrington is the one with the debt problem or the farm animal business or both. Meanwhile, the older female escorts hover like decorative monsters. Their purpose is to ensure nobody enjoys themselves too much, gets too close, or says anything too worldly. They are equipped with folding fans, tight lips, and an uncanny knack for appearing right as someone is whispering something improper behind a large houseplant. Men, for their part, spend the season looking vaguely uncomfortable in very stiff neckwear, frequenting exclusive clubs where they smoke cigars and worry about marriage gifts. They are required to dance just enough to seem pleasing, but not so much that they're suspected of having any real interest in anything besides sword fighting and liquor. Mothers manage the whole season like military offensives. Seating arrangements are strategic plans. Flower displays are encoded signals. A successful match is not about romance, it's financial combat. If your daughter marries a nobleman, you succeed. If she runs off with a lyric poet, you send her away to the country and blame her nervous condition. And let's not overlook the scandals. Every season has them. Someone's attendant finds a romantic letter in the library. Someone's eldest son is mysteriously gone following an event in an Italian city. Someone is found in a garden labyrinth at nightfall. Rumours spread faster than the illness, and social standing rises and falls based on whether someone wore the wrong hand coverings or was caught making prolonged visual contact. As the weeks progress, panic sets in. Marriage proposals begin to circulate. Some are calculated, some are honest. Most are discreetly settled between the parents over afternoon tea while the potential couple awkwardly discuss whether they both have an affinity for horses. You, naturally, remain composed throughout. Whether you accept a proposal, refuse it, or dramatically faint during one for theatrical effect, you have maintained your composure, your fan skill, and your carefully constructed social standing. Because in the end, it's not about affection, it's about lineage. Marriage here is less a joining of spirits and more an amalgamation of estates. And now we will conclude the evening, because after all this polite chaos, it is time for a much-deserved collapse into fine bedding and the reassuring certainty that you did not accidentally marry a lesser nobleman named Clive. You have the latest in home technology, electrical signalling devices, voice pipes, and perhaps even a talking machine if you enjoy yelling into a conical receiver and waiting for the person operating the switchboard to pass judgment on your speech. Yes, your residence is at the cutting edge of progress, circa the year 1900. You are practically living in the future, assuming the future runs on black gold, human labour, and a genuinely unhealthy fascination with polished copper. Let's begin with the miracle of the electric bell mechanism. A network of cables and circuits, cleverly concealed as stylish wall-mounted buttons, lets you summon a servant from any room, sometimes even the correct one. You push a button in the morning sitting area, and somewhere below stairs a tiny bell rings and a servant immediately responds, or at least sighs heavily before ascending 5 levels of stairs. The signal board in the servant quarters is a flickering pattern of aristocratic sloth. Every room has a corresponding label, and when you push the button, a small pointer or light illuminates. It's like historical instant messaging, but with more steps and fewer cartoon faces. If you are especially modernised, you also have speaking conduits. These copper marvels permit you to shout into a small mouthpiece set into the wall, transmitting your smooth tones directly to the kitchen, the wine steward's cupboard, or the dishwashing assistant's inner ear. They are amazing tools for indirect hostility. Indeed, Charles, once more I requested the toast to be warm, not burned like an ancient city. And then, a shock. There's the telephone, a new device that enables you to converse with someone in another structure or even another area without dispatching a uniformed attendant sprinting into traffic with a handwritten message. Of course, that the procedure is somewhat complex. You lift the receiver, state your name loudly, ask for the connection, and wait calmly while a smoke-breathing operator connects you using a complex board that looks like a brass sea creature. Discussions are excitingly awkward. Hello? Yes, I'm trying to talk to. Hello? No, I said no. I'm not inquiring about ground meat. I'm asking about, hello, operator. Eventually you give up and send a note anyway. Other domestic wonders include the coal-fed water heating unit. It promises immediate heated water, which is only true if your definition of immediate involves a servant starting a fire at 4 in the morning and tending it like a sacred fire until your bath is cool and full of carbon dust. You simply smile and pretend it is relaxing. You also have gas illumination throughout the residence, which adds a dreamy luster to every space and a slight feeling of impending explosion. Each light is manually ignited in the evening, making you feel refined and cultured until the whole place smells like someone has been cooking over charcoal indoors. Open one window, maybe a second. If you're feeling adventurous, wave a decorative fan. Your concept of temperature regulation is simply moving to a different section of the house and hoping for a draft. The phrase climate control is still decades away, as is the ability to sleep without slowly dissolving into your own padded furniture in the summer. In the kitchen, there's a mechanical serving lift to send items from the cooking area to the upper landing. It moves slowly, makes grinding noises, and one incorrect tug of the rope means your baked dessert could arrive with the velocity of a medieval weapon. Still, it's marginally better than watching a male servant attempt the stairs with a large tray and a definite desire to perish. Cleaning is managed by a mysterious apparatus in the basement that makes loud hissing and clanging sounds and needs 3 people to operate. You never see it, but you hear stories. Awful stories. Rumours that someone once got their necktie caught and had to be freed using gardening scissors. You call all of this convenience? To be fair, it's an improvement from boiling water over a fire and drafting correspondence with a bird feather. But modern comfort? Not quite yet. There is no wireless access, no microwave oven, and no way to look up whether a fruit dessert can explode. And yet you feel state-of-the-art. Surrounded by gleaming copper and heavy switches, you lean back and declare, "Yes, my residence is fully equipped with the newest developments." You just hope none of it electrocutes you before the final course. Now we will move on to a more traditional comfort, rest time, where 12 servants, 3 heated metal bed warmers, and an entire firewood budget work together to help you sleep in style. Why remain in one large home when you could visit 3? You pack luggage, hire more staff, and leave for the coast, only to complain that the ocean air isn't as invigorating as promised in the newspaper. Because being extremely wealthy in turn-of-the-century London means you don't take a break to unwind. You take a vacation to display exhaustion in a new setting. You are tired, my dear. Tired of high society, tired of the haze, tired of the same dozen individuals at every dinner debating tariffs and sheep meat. It's time for a different wall covering and elevation. Preparing for travel is a full-scale military operation. Luggage must be filled with enough clothing for a 4-month isolation or a 3-day weekend, whichever happens first. You require outfits for morning strolls, afternoon calls, evening meals, unexpected downpours, and dramatic exits. Each requires specific headwear, footwear, and emotional readiness. Your personal attendant or lady's maid supervises the packing, which is fortunate because you haven't personally folded an item since the last major conflict. Meanwhile, male servants load the carriage with the grace of a dance company and the muttering of people who know your collection of sunshades doesn't truly require its own container. The journey begins with optimism and little back support. Trains are the technological wonder of the era, provided you travel in the finest compartment, which you obviously do. It features soft seating, polished wood surfaces, and an atmosphere of judgment so dense you could spread it on bread. You settle in with a newspaper, some boiled hard candies, and a mild life crisis. Upon reaching your chosen coastal refuge, or perhaps a country estate borrowed from a minor nobleman with joint pain, you are met by a fresh group of servants eager to find out which member of your party will request the most dramatic late-night beverage service. Your leisure schedule is somehow more draining than your city routine. Morning meals that blend into late morning meals, swift walks that turn into elaborate social displays, outdoor meals requiring 6 male servants, 2 portable tables, and a spare meat product. You believed you were here to relax. Instead, you've been pressured into an early morning painting session in a field full of livestock while a relative criticises your brushwork over weak tea. You do visit the seashore, naturally. The sand is harsh. The changing unit, a wheeled shelter pulled directly into the water, feels like a trap designed by someone who despises good taste. You change into a heavy swimming garment that could submerge a large animal, then plunge into the freezing water for exactly a minute and a half before retreating back inside to reevaluate your past choices. Evenings are filled with silent acting games, card games, and theatrical readings of classic poetry. Someone is always playing the piano. No one knows if they are talented. Everyone applauds regardless. You consider pretending to have a twisted ankle to avoid the third consecutive night of reciting poetry while blindfolded. Halfway through the trip, a letter arrives from home. There's been a minor scandal involving the groundskeeper, the glass enclosure, and a missing bottle of fortified wine. You sigh. Someone must return and resolve it, but not you. You're still occupied pretending to appreciate the rural setting. Eventually, you announce yourself restored, which is high society code for, I have used up all reasonable excuses to keep avoiding my correspondence. You begin the trip back, just as complex, just as heavy with baggage, and just as tiring. Back at your city home, everything is as you left it, neat, shining, and slightly resentful. You unpack, bathe, and sit in your formal living room, questioning out loud why you ever left in the first place. But give it a week, you'll be restless again, and the elevated terrain has been so restorative this season. Now let's get ready for the last comfort of the day. Sleep, but not before being gently positioned, tucked in, and warmed by a small fire the size of your own self-awareness. Your physician is impeccably dressed and entirely convinced that blood-sucking worms are a wise choice. You sneeze, and 3 separate people offer a treatment involving mustard-based patches and reclining chairs for fainting. Welcome to high-class medical care, where the manner is charming, but the effectiveness is questionable. You have access to the finest medical minds wealth can procure. Unfortunately, they are still eagerly recommending a metallic poison, vigorous rubbing, and something called strengthening wine. That is 80% alcohol and 20% hopeful thinking. Your doctor arrives exactly at midday, his top hat slightly crooked, carrying a medical case filled with tools that would not look out of place in a metalworker's shop. He speaks with the slow certainty of a man who once studied anatomy briefly in a local tavern. You describe your symptoms: exhaustion, cold feelings, a minor cough, and he nods gravely before diagnosing you with anxiety, deep sadness, or an excess of internal gas. His treatment? Bloodletting. Always bloodletting, either through the worms, which are natural and calming, or a small cut just behind the ear, because apparently that is where all your poor judgments are stored. You attempt to object, but he is already preparing a container and humming a dance tune. If that proves ineffective, you will be prescribed a mixture of a sedative, a pain reliever, and ground plant material that is guaranteed to make you forget not only your illness but your own given name. Side effects may include losing consciousness, shaking, and accidentally composing a love poem about your female servant. For stomach problems, you are given a powdery substance that balances the internal systems and tastes like disappointment. For pains in the head, it's acidic compresses, a darkened room, and possibly a small chime to summon someone to read calming verse to you until you either feel better or simply surrender. For more serious issues, well, then you go to the public medical facility, which, despite being technically more advanced, is somewhere between a creepy old building and a utensil drawer. You don't go to the hospital unless it is genuinely extreme, like missing a limb extreme. Even then, you might just wrap it in cloth and hope for the best. Thankfully, you are affluent, so your doctor comes to you, trailing the scent of expensive liquor and misplaced confidence. You are examined in your drawing room on a long cushioned sofa, surrounded by concerned family members holding your hand and updating their final wishes just in case someone loses consciousness. Someone else is drafting a letter to your legal advisor. But don't worry, there are also modern remedies. Electrical stimulation is very fashionable. You might be offered a slight shock to awaken the internal organs, which feels less like healing and more like being mildly offended by a kitchen appliance. There are also water cures, which involve sitting in a slightly warm bath while being yelled at by someone holding a clipboard. Of course, many complaints can be attributed to poor air quality, so your room is aired daily with the windows opened wide, even during the cold season, because nothing says healing environment like a severe drop in body temperature. Fresh air is the answer to everything, especially if you can breathe it while drinking savoury meat broth and wearing 3 thick shawls. Women in particular are susceptible to a wide-ranging nervous disorder, a blanket term for everything from unhappiness to ambition. Treatments include mandatory rest, more of the powerful sedative, or, if you're fortunate, being sent to the coast to gaze at the ocean until you forget what female independence is. Men, conversely, are diagnosed with too much work, weariness, or a specific kind of fever. The solution? A country retreat, a diet of shellfish and fortified wine, and light reading. You know, healing. At the conclusion of it all, you are either miraculously improved or slightly worse and extremely disoriented. Either way, the doctor removes his hat, pockets a substantial fee, and assures you he will return the following week to repeat the exact same procedure. And you sip your medicinal drink, lie back against a pile of perfectly soft pillows, and assure yourself, at least it wasn't removal of a body part this time. Now let's retire upstairs, slowly, gently, without too much excitement, because the only thing more important than physical well-being in this time is restful sleep for men. The private club is a sanctuary. Completely male, completely smoky, and almost entirely focused on doing nothing but drinking and complaining about the climate and the tariffs they attempt to avoid. Welcome to the gentleman's establishment. Your escape from accountability, emotional expression, and any chance of hearing the word washing. Situated in one of the greener areas of London behind imposing rock columns and a door that only opens for those with the appropriate level of boredom and fancy vest decoration, the club is your haven of calculated inactivity. The interior design is dominated by dark wood. The window coverings are thick enough to suppress a popular uprising. The illumination is low, not for atmosphere, but to conceal accidental expressions of happiness. A large, bright fire burns fiercely in the corner. It's unclear if it's lit for warmth or just to discourage any notion of leaving. You step inside and nod seriously at the attendant, who returns the gesture with exactly the same expression he has worn since 1874. You take off your overcoat, hand it to a male servant who will later fold it with monastic dedication, and proceed into the main sitting area. This is where major powers come to relax heavily. The air is a strong blend of cigar smoke, brandy fumes, and historical arrogance. Somewhere in the back, a former military officer is mumbling about an old war, possibly to himself. 2 high-ranking noblemen sit near a window playing a game of strategy with such focus you suspect neither recalls the rules. No one is smiling. That would imply hopefulness, or worse, contentment. You take a seat in a deep leather chair so worn it might qualify as a family inheritance. A waiter quietly appears, offers you a glass of something old, brown, and at least 40% alcohol. You accept without asking. The first rule of the club is never ask questions that might lead to answers. Conversation is optional and, if attempted, must revolve around 3 approved topics: political matters, atmospheric conditions, and how life used to be superior, specifically in the year 1852. Someone might mention the stock exchange. Someone else might sneer. A disagreement begins over whether coal is the future or merely the only profitable choice for investment. No one reaches a conclusion. Upstairs there are more rooms, for games with cue sticks, for card games, a library no one actually reads in, and a separate room for smoking that at this point may as well be a vertical pipe. You think about a game of pool but decide against it. That would require physical exertion. Decisions are occasionally made here, or at least hinted at. A member of the upper house might quietly suggest support for a proposed law. A landowner might announce his intention to buy another property, just to keep it out of the hands of the newly rich. A planning group is assembled. It meets, it disbands, nothing changes. There is also a peculiar custom of drafting notes here. The club's writing paper is thick, off-white, and dangerously sharp at the corners. You prepare a note to your legal advisor about refinancing your hunting property, then another to your tailor requesting softer sleeve ends. You write them with a writing instrument older than your relative. By now, you've been at the club for hours and achieved absolutely nothing, which is the exact point. That is the objective. The club exists to maintain the delicate pretense that you are considering doing something important without ever having to prove it. Before you depart, you stop by the serving area for one final drink and overhear a member muttering, "Terrible haze approaching," as though this is both new information and deeply significant. You nod in agreement. It is the club's equivalent of a secret handshake. You do not say farewell. When you leave, you simply disappear like ambition, energy, or the concept of effort. Now it is time to depart from this echo chamber of dark wood and male vanity and prepare for the night ahead, because while the club provides a temporary rest, nothing says true comfort like an evening bath prepared by another person's hands. You seldom see your children, but you know they are being raised by someone with incredible toughness and a core of mild resentment. She decides who gets a treat and who requires therapy later in life. Welcome to the children's quarters, the highest level of your large house, and the lowest level of emotional warmth. Here lives the childcare provider, a woman created from soot and simple food, armed with unmatched discipline and at least one classic novel's worth of unspoken emotion. She's not simply a hired helper, she's a fundamental institution. The children fear her, the servants respect her. You, the parent, mainly avoid her, partly out of shame, but mostly because she looks like she could dismantle your entire family lineage with a slightly raised eyebrow. She wakes before sunrise and enforces a schedule tighter than a naval formation. Morning meal at 7, studies at 8, outdoor activities at the precise moment the haze lifts. There are no allowances, not for a runny nose, not for a sprained joint, not even for deep sadness caused by too much cooked vegetable. You could technically visit the children's quarters, but why interfere with a perfectly functional routine? Instead, you ask about your children once a week, usually during tea. How are they? You ask vaguely. Still fighting each other? The childcare provider nods. She will manage it. The nursery itself is a separate world. Part classroom, part sick bay, part holding cell from a classic story. Toys are made of wood. Education is strict. Laughter is allowed, but only in moderation and preferably inside. Emotional growth is delegated to the female tutor, who occasionally reads encouraging texts like the popular religious allegory or a guide on how to act like an obedient young woman. Meals are simple and on time. No elaborate sauces here. Just stewed dried fruit, boiled potatoes, and the kind of cooked cereal that stares back at you. Dining customs are rigidly enforced from a very young age. Dropped utensils are considered a personal failing. Resting elbows on the surface, a serious offence. Eating with one's mouth open, grounds for immediate enrolment in a faraway boarding school and strict punishment. And discipline, oh, it's effective. Misbehaviour is met with serious discussions, time spent in the corner for reflection, or worse, a look of disappointment that seems to shrink a child's spirit by 3 sizes. You once saw it across the formal living room and felt vaguely compelled to apologise yourself. The child care provider is also the guardian of affection. She determines when embraces are permitted, when commendation is deserved, which is rare, and whether the child deserves to be put to bed with a story or a serious warning. The nighttime story is frequently a cautionary tale with a theme of obedience, order, or the subtle power of remaining unnoticed. Her clothes mirror the strictness of her nature, always black, severely pressed, with a timepiece pinned to her chest like a weapon of timeliness. Her footwear appears constructed of heavy metal and principle. Her manner of speaking is soothing, sharp, and naturally commanding. When she walks into a room, even the decorations seem to stand at attention. Despite all that stiffness and resolve, a surprising kindness exists underneath. She is aware of which child dreads lightning storms. She knows who detests carrots and claims a fake allergy. She treats scraped knees and mended hearts with the same cool competence. She discreetly informs the chef when someone has had a difficult morning and might benefit from an extra dessert portion. She makes a point of not seeing when a child cries over their sewing. You once heard her singing softly to the youngest child during a feverish evening. She thought she was alone. You never brought it up. You are unsure why. So while you host social gatherings and attend musical performances, your children are gaining restraint, structure, and perhaps just a little hardiness. And one day, as adults, they will recall their caregiver not with affection exactly, but with deep respect, because she did more than just raise them, she defined them. Now, as the nursery becomes silent, it is time for you to return to your world of fine fabrics, silk, bed sheets, after-dinner drinks, and the quiet comfort that everything is being managed by someone else. Sleep soundly. The nanny has the situation handled. Correspondence is slow, formal, and requires penmanship that would frighten a contemporary chemist. Each letter provides a chance to demonstrate that you are either quite witty or at the minimum still alive. You create letters the way some people write full-length novels, slowly, dramatically, and with the firm conviction that everyone is desperate for your insights on the atmospheric conditions, Cousin Beatrix's skin irritation, and the unfortunate decline of society since the introduction of margarine. The first phase of dispatching a letter is selecting your writing paper. This is no ordinary stock. It is engraved, featuring your initials, imported from a French source, and heavier than many small pets. You would not consider scribbling on anything less than 300 grams per square metre, cream-coloured paper with a watermark so complex it warrants a separate explanation. Next, you choose an instrument for writing, not merely a pen, but the pen. A writing instrument, inherited through the generations, routinely polished, refilled with ink darker than your butler's unspoken disapproval. You write deliberately because errors are unacceptable. There is no option to delete. There is only starting over and silently weeping into your garment. You begin the correspondence with an introductory phrase so elaborate it consumes the entire opening line. My dearest Lady Gertrude of the Windward Tea Society. And that's the condensed version. Then comes the main content, a mix of polite greetings, veiled insults, and elaborate explanations for missing an event you never intended to go to. Need to reject an invitation for dinner? You cannot simply say no. You must fabricate an illness, mention a distressed relative, or claim that your physician has recommended you avoid all exposure to lamp oil for the remainder of the quarter. It is part courtesy, part elaborate lie, entirely a performance. The true enjoyment, however, is in the final note. This is where the actual meaning slips through. P.S. Be sure to tell Lady Collingwood that her new hat is striking, which, as everyone understands, is a subtle way of saying who permitted that disaster. Once your letter is complete, it is sealed with wax because nothing communicates urgency like waiting 10 minutes for melted resin to become firm. You then summon a male servant who takes it to a postal wagon which delivers it to the mail office, which might deliver it to the intended recipient sometime this month, or possibly not. Mail delivery is a risk, and your envelope might spend a week beneath someone's wheel of cheese before being noticed. A slightly quicker method of communication. There is the wire message. Ah yes, the instant message of its era. If instant messaging cost several shillings per word and made you sound like an uneasy automaton to dispatch a wire message, you proceed to the telegraph office. Complete a short paper in capital letters and meticulously shorten your text to avoid unnecessary action words. Every word has a charge, and punctuation is even more expensive. Expressions of feeling are discouraged. A letter might read, "My dearest Margot, I eagerly anticipate seeing you again as your presence illuminates my soul like the gas fixtures along Piccadilly." A wire message states, "Arriving, pause, bring bag, pause, do not question, pause." Receiving a wire message is both thrilling and alarming. It could signify a happy arrival, a scandalous runaway marriage, or that someone's bags have exploded in Dover. There is no middle ground. The packet arrives, the room falls silent, and everyone strains to hear as you read aloud something like "Sister fell down again." Pause. Please advise immediately. Pause. For those too lazy to compose and too dramatic for wire messages, there are visiting cards. You leave them behind like clues, indicating to others that you called without actually having to speak. There is an entire protocol involved. A corner folded signifies you made a personal appearance. A smudge on the edge means you are in mourning. 2 cards left means one is intended for the mistress of the residence and the second is a precaution in case the butler discards the first one. Ultimately, communication in turn-of-the-century London is not about directness. It is about ritual, about conveying information just indirectly enough to safeguard your standing while still instigating a major conflict. And with that, let us close the curtains and allow the ink to dry. The next day will be another one filled with messages, misunderstandings, and the occasional wire message that simply reads, "Halt." Why purchase a simple coat when you can have it lined with white fur and customised with your initials in case you forget your own identity? Acquiring goods is less a necessity, more a high-stakes competition. And your preferred activity? Retail supremacy. You do not shop for items you require. You shop for items that inform others of their lower economic standing. You step into the shop not as a patron, but as an empress entering a confrontation, armed with a coin holder, a displeased expression, and a definite view on French needlework. The most exclusive London stores recognise you by your family name, or at least they pretend they do. You are escorted inside with the kind of hushed respect typically reserved for nobility or volatile, wild animals. The attendant tips his headwear. The shop assistant praises your hand coverings, which you are only wearing to avoid touching any items constructed from inferior wool. Inside, the atmosphere is of expensive dust, the kind of dust that has experienced velvet and absolute quiet. Every flat surface gleams. Every display is carefully arranged. A single hand covering rests on a velvet cushion. A hat is poised on a mannequin head with more elegant posture than most members of the aristocracy. A small bag seems to observe you as if it is aware of your secrets and prepared to trade them for the right price. You begin in accessories, because accessories are where personal preference becomes strategic. Umbrellas trimmed in lace so delicate it is considered aggressive. Visiting card cases crafted from iridescent shell and at least one creature facing extinction. Fans everywhere, each one subtly announcing, "Observe my wealth, and also I am becoming overheated." Next, to the clothing, you are presented with rolls of cloth, each one imported, inspected, and unnecessarily textured. You pass your hand over fabric from India, woven tweed from Scotland, and a material that supposedly originated from a camel, though no one will elaborate on the process. The assistant smiles as you show displeasure at the colour samples. You desire something prominent but not too prominent, something that communicates royal confidence without bordering on stage attire. Everything is tailored naturally. Ready-made garments are for the commoners and visitors. A clothing designer is summoned from the back room with a measuring device and a manner that implies he once fitted a bishop and has been traumatized ever since. Body measurements are taken. Terms like imperial bust line and acceptable flare are employed. You do not ask follow-up questions, you simply indicate assent. Then comes the adding of initials. Why limit this to towels and handkerchiefs when you can label everything? Sleeping attire, coat linings, the bottoms of shoes. If it can hold stitching, it can bear your initials. You briefly consider adding your initials to your male servant's back just to prevent anyone else from accidentally claiming him at a formal gathering. The purchasing continues. Fragrances in containers shaped like regret, walking supports that function as arrogance, amplifiers and hand coverings lined with the softest leather legally obtainable. You purchase a small vessel for tea that costs more than a labourer earns in a month, not because you need another one, but because this specific item makes you feel vaguely superior to your relative Winifred. And then the spontaneous purchase area. Small decorative items, pointless trinkets, crystal trays for ashes even though no one smokes, and silver implements for hair you no longer style yourself. You do not desire them. You require them for the presentation, for the rumours, for the judgmental guests at your dinner party. By the time you depart, you have spent enough to finance a small settlement and obtained a pile of shopping so large it requires a separate horse-drawn carriage. You feel triumphant, powerful, slightly light-headed from the aroma of imported sandalwood and inherited intergenerational distress. Upon arriving home, your new possessions are unpacked and examined by your personal attendant, who murmurs under her breath and secretly intends to try on the hand coverings when you are at tea. You approve with a nod as your storage space for clothing expands by a considerable amount and your ability to see financial reality shrinks like a silk scarf that has been boiled. Because in turn-of-the-century London, acquiring goods is not about fulfilling a requirement. It is about establishing a heritage of perfectly tailored outerwear and highly non-functional items. It is about entering a space and knowing your ear ornaments cost more than the musical instrument. Now, as the sun descends and your butler tidies away the financial records you will never examine, it is time for rest. After all, the next day there are still horseshoes to be purchased for the animal. You do not actually engage in manual labour, but you do attend discussions at your bank where the most important decisions revolve around which type of sweet baked good to consume. Investments are managed by someone else, ideally a family member with a hyphenated surname, because in turn-of-the-century London, possessing financial resources is a full-time occupation. Controlling it is for other individuals. You merely float between the comfortable seats, indicate knowing agreement at numerical figures, and occasionally whisper we should diversify, as if you possess the slightest comprehension of that term. Your wealth is not derived from hard work. It originates from coal mines, railroad systems, inherited shipping misfortunes, and a suspiciously well-timed marriage 3 generations in the past. Money simply materializes. It accumulates in the background, like fungus or gossip. You begin your day of commerce with a brief carriage ride to your preferred financial establishment, ideally one featuring stone pillars, at least 2 painted portraits of deceased men who look like they detested enjoyment, and a large entrance hall so resonant it makes the sound of your coin holder seem impressive. You are welcomed by a financial officer who wears glasses, repeats indeed every few moments, and has never been observed blinking. You are shown into a secluded conference room where the air carries the scent of money and also mild disappointment. The financial officer presents account books, diagrams, and a small silver platter of baked goods. You select the shortbread, traditional, understated, and unlikely to drop crumbs onto your lap during a negotiation. This is the only genuine decision you will make today. The financial officer explains your current resources, investments in tea canisters, possibly tall mammals. No one is completely certain. You indicate agreement, as if you have just resolved the national debt. Occasionally you lean forward to utter phrases like, "What is the mood of the European markets?" which conveys absolutely no meaning but sounds incredibly well informed. The peak of your financial planning session is agreeing to open an additional account. No one understands the rationale. It is tradition. You possess more accounts than cousins, and like your cousins, some of them are performing poorly in a noticeable manner. Back in your residence, your incoming mail includes vague reports from your representative in New York, who is involved in an activity called arbitrage and is unquestionably billing you for his midday meal. You receive wire messages from your legal consultant such as profit margins improving. Pause. Recall, you own the majority of Surrey. Pause. You occasionally pretend to peruse the Financial Times, folding it just so, as if absorbing wisdom through your fingertips. In reality, you are scanning for comical drawings and making a mental note to invest in whatever Lord Ashcombe just sold, because if he is withdrawing, it must finally be a wise decision. You also possess property, significant amounts of it. So much, in fact, you sometimes forget about entire towns registered under your name. Every few months someone reminds you that a tenant has passed away, a structure has fallen apart, or a hog has attempted to run for local political office. You indicate agreement, promise to investigate the matter and proceed to more urgent issues such as deciding whether to purchase another horse. When questioned about your wealth, you say things like, "I supervise a portfolio," or "my interests are rather broad," which could signify anything from securities and landed estates to "I own half a patent on a machine that peels lemons using steam power." The truth is, your money manages itself, by which we mean it is managed by an exhausted financial clerk named Cyril, who drinks alcohol at lunch and hopes you never notice the punctuation errors in the quarterly reports he sends you. You file them directly into the "I will definitely read this later" stack, otherwise known as the fireplace. Yet despite all this effort to appear occupied, you have never exerted yourself over a balance sheet. You have discussions, not actual labour, portfolios, not undertakings. And when someone asks about the state of your business affairs, you simply let out a breath, gaze over the edge of your wine glass and say, "Challenging, of course, but steady." Because that is the secret to appearing to work, sounding just tired enough to seem significant without ever setting down your baked good. Now, let us close the financial record, extinguish the desk lamp, and go upstairs. Because nothing embodies wealth quite like falling asleep in expensive cotton while someone else determines how to pay for the roof repairs. Giving to charity is an artistic expression. You attend formal events, deliver sincere speeches about helping those in lower social standing, and then return home to complain that your butler's necktie is too shiny. Because assisting the less fortunate is extremely vital, as long as it is conducted elegantly, from a distance, and ideally while wearing hand coverings. Your charitable activities are not focused on solving poverty. They are focused on experiencing moral superiority while consuming a beverage imported from France. The day commences with a communication from the Ladies' Benevolence Society, inviting you to a charity meal in support of orphaned chimney cleaners, or perhaps it is impoverished female educators or possibly aquatic birds, you are not entirely sure. The main thing is, there are small sandwiches and an opportunity to be observed exhibiting concern. You arrive fashionably late in your second-best hat, the one that communicates "I advocate for fairness, but only if it matches my decorative pin." The space is filled with other financial supporters of goodwill, each one gripping delicate teacups and expressing profound anxiety. In between hushed laughter about Lady Ashcroft's third engagement, a featured speaker begins to talk. There is a presentation about hardship, perhaps some statistical data. There is always at least one poignant story involving someone named Little Arthur and a missing piece of footwear. The attendees gently dab their eyes with lace handkerchiefs. You promise yourself to take action. Not immediately, naturally, but soon. When it is convenient, financial contributions are gathered. You write down an amount on a commitment form that is just substantial enough to earn a mention in the following week's Society magazine, but not so large that anyone suspects you are newly wealthy. It is a subtle performance, kindness without causing financial discomfort. Sometimes you even briefly visit the poor, from a safe distance. You tour a newly established home for orphans or a communal kitchen, escorted by a respected religious figure and 2 male servants. You ask probing questions like how charming and where do the poor rest? While attempting to avoid making direct visual contact with anything that smells like genuine suffering. You distribute a few coins, offer a smile to the small children, deliver a short address you rehearsed in the carriage. Then you return to your city residence and take an extended warm bath to recover from the feeling of moral complication. You also financially support certain projects, a hospital section, a reading room, a public water fountain that nobody requested. Your family name appears etched into stone somewhere, and you receive letters of appreciation written by someone with exceptionally neat handwriting and profound existential uncertainty. The poor naturally remain poor, but now they are poor with your name displayed over their learning facility, which feels like advancement. Your charitable endeavours also involve hosting social events. These are the ultimate expressions of your moral charity. Formal dances, gala dinners, fundraising musical performances featuring your distant relative on the harp. You sell admission to other affluent individuals so they can contribute money to slightly less affluent individuals, all while moving gracefully beneath an elaborate light fixture that could finance a communal kitchen for a year. There are protocols, of course, no discussing actual financial hardship during the gathering, no bringing your own impoverished children, and absolutely no serving fewer than 12 small appetizers per attendee. It is still a social occasion after all. Back at home, you document your charitable acts in a small journal labelled Social Responsibility, which is kept on a shelf between records of the cook's errors and people who are obligated to do me favours. It contains notes like contributed 3 golden coins to Widow Relief Fund. Wear dark green velvet next time and stay away from Mrs. Farthing. She tires easily, smells of boiled vegetable. Ultimately, your charitable activity is not about changing the world. It is about preserving a specific reputation for elegance, generosity, and having just enough compassion to remain socially acceptable. You are not cruel, you are simply selectively helpful. And in turn of the century London, that is more than sufficient to be considered a virtuous person. Now, let us return home, light a scented wick manufactured by visually impaired monks, and settle into your hand-stitched bedspread. You have improved the world today by discussing the matter publicly, with great refinement. Every affluent family experiences its moments of disgrace, illicit relationships, financial ruin, questionable acquisitions of artwork, all managed discreetly. Unless you are unfortunate enough to be featured in the popular press, in which case time for an extended trip overseas, because in turn of the century London, being wealthy does not imply being morally upright. It merely signifies that you can finance a superior misleading story. Moral principles are adaptable, public image is delicate, and damage control is essentially a competitive event. Everyone is observing, everyone is gossiping, and everyone is pretending not to be interested while being intensely interested. Your personal disgrace might begin with a guest lingering too long near the musical instrument, or a noblewoman observed entering the incorrect carriage, or someone, heavens forbid, selling the inherited silver to settle a debt from gambling and accidentally smiling while doing so. It does not take much. A sigh, a quick look, an outstanding bill from the clothing designer, and suddenly your family's name is being mentioned by every bored housemaid in Mayfair. The first action is denial. It is all a terrible misunderstanding. You announce to no one in particular as your relative quietly sells off 3 investments and dispatches a male servant to retrieve a misplaced pair of trousers from a painter's studio. The second action is diversion. Host a luxurious gathering, declare a charitable contribution, circulate a rumour about someone else's disgrace, preferably involving a rival's young female relative and a regrettable permanent mark on the skin. Nothing distracts reporters like the scent of new gossip. And then withdrawal, the expected strategy. Suddenly, you are in the rural area for medical reasons. or visiting acquaintances in the mountains, or examining Renaissance gardening methods in Italy, which is wealthy person code for staying hidden until the newspapers find a new subject to ridicule. Illicit relationships are particularly delicate. Everyone engages in them. No one speaks of them. Not directly, at least. There are close companionships, continental acquaintances, and the always popular artistic mentorship. If you are cautious, it remains a thrilling private matter. If you are not, it becomes a public drama. Correspondence is burned. Servants are paid to remain silent. The family's legal representative begins to exhibit nervous tics. And if the situation becomes especially dire, someone fakes a sudden loss of consciousness or an emotional breakdown that necessitates 6 months at a spa near Vienna. Meanwhile, the news media, especially the Daily Sketch, thrives on disgrace. One poorly timed photograph, one misquoted comment, and suddenly you are the antagonist in a serialized moral tale. Noble families, shame splashed across newspaper headings. The truth is irrelevant. Fact is flexible. Headlines last forever. Occasionally, someone attempts to transform the disgrace into popularity. A written account of their life, a tour of public speaking engagements, a dramatic appearance at an art opening wearing excessive velvet and not enough regret. Sometimes it succeeds. Sometimes they end up exiled to the coast of England, composing poetry about betrayal and a medical condition involving the joints. Your domestic staff, of course, is aware of everything. The butler knows who visited after normal hours. The maid knows which ear ornaments disappeared and why. The cook knows who has been restricting their food intake and who has been consuming too much. But they also understand the unspoken rules. Keeping secrets is rewarded. Talking too much results in losing references. And then there is the family's attempt at damage control. Female relatives descend like birds of prey. Male relatives suggest arranged marriages. Someone inevitably knows a minor nobleman in need of a marriage payment, or a daughter with low expectations and prominent facial features. Disgrace is not eliminated. It is absorbed, diverted, and, if necessary, concealed beneath 10 generations of financial resources and denial. Of course, the general public enjoys a good disgrace. They love it. It makes the wealthy appear human, flawed, and relatable, which is exactly why you need to let them know you're not like that. You're above any criticism, beyond fault, and if nothing else works, temporarily out of sight. Eventually the gossip fades, the newspapers move along, and the parties start up again. And you, having lived through the scandal, reappear in polite company with new clothes, a slightly altered hair shade, and a renewed appreciation for staying quiet. Because ultimately money can shield you from many things: starvation, discomfort, beige furniture, but it cannot protect you from the one permanent reality of high society. Everyone talks and no one forgets anything. Now settle down, pull the curtains closed and get some rest. Because tomorrow brings a fresh set of rumours, new idle chatter, and the never-ending, tiring routine of protecting your name. Dirty clothes vanish into the service area, never to be seen again. Clean garments return as if by sorcery, and you remain completely unaware of the existence of stiffening agents, washing powder, or human hardship. After all, in 1900s London, cleanliness may be next to virtue, but only if someone else is doing all the scrubbing. You've never once washed a sock. You've never boiled a shirt. You have never shouted at a wash basin in frustration, and that is exactly how things should stay. Laundry is a hidden activity, both literally and socially. It occurs below your floor, in tiled rooms filled with vapour, loud banging, and the lingering scent of wet cloth and the general misery of others. You've heard stories about these places. Some claim they're hotter than the equator. Others suggest the floors are always slick, like a public steam room run entirely by spectres who forgot to prepare the washing before they died. Your personal laundress is a figure of legend. She has her own workspace in the mansion, her own working hours, and probably a tiny grudge against any outfit that has too many layers. You don't know her actual name. You're not even certain what she looks like. But you're sure she is tougher than most soldiers and definitely has opinions about your private garments. Once a week your clothes are collected, they disappear into wicker baskets and cotton bundles, taken away by a maid who handles your nightwear with the respect usually reserved for sacred objects. You try not to consider what happens next, because what happens next involves superheated water, strong chemicals, rubbing, squeezing out water, air drying, pressing, ironing, and finally applying stiffener to a degree of firmness usually only for protective metal gear. Stiffener is an entire level of terror by itself. Your shirt collars could easily slice up a loaf of bread. Your underskirts create rustling sounds loud enough to scare an animal. Your pocket squares are so rigid they could be used as weapons during a disagreement. All this is accomplished by a person up to their elbows in scorching water and primitive chemical processes. If you're a gentleman, your removable collars appear, folded with such exactness you wonder if you should wear them or hang them on the wall. If you're a woman, your undergarments are returned, carefully ironed, with only the faintest aroma of sweet flowers or perhaps harsh cleaner. It's hard to distinguish. Your attire feels cleaner than your own conscience. Laundry is organised, stacked neatly, and delivered back to your chambers by someone who leaves without a sound like a starch-scented phantom. You step into your dressing room and there it sits, lines of fresh fabric perfectly folded, precisely arranged, ready to be worn, made messy, and sent back to the lower depths. Again, you don't question this whole routine. To question it would bring on a profound fear of the universe and, perhaps worse, an expectation to assist. And you did not fight your way into the highest ranks of society just to rinse dirt from underclothes or master the complex technique of drying socks in a city choked with smoke. Occasionally an item of clothing is misplaced. It's never mentioned. A single sock vanishes. The world simply consumes it. A vest comes back. Slightly pink, you declare it to be fashionable. A silk slip arrives with a tear in it. You claim it must have caught on your sharp intellect, and move on with your day. But sometimes, late at night, you think about her, the laundress, the woman with incredibly strong arms and a far-off expression. Does she ever silently curse your fine trim? Does she long for a world without ruffles and lace? Has she memorized every symbol on your possessions and silently judged you for them? You will never find out, and that is exactly how the entire system continues to function. She stays below ground, you stay up top. The wash cycles through time and space with mechanical accuracy, powered by raw labour and complete silence. So now, as you slide between impossibly clean sheets, which are firmer than your father's beliefs and smoother than your butler's excuses, offer a silent thanks to the unseen people who made your pillow cover feel like a fluffy cloud and your robe less like a rag and more like a formal decree. Sleep well, and may your dreams be completely spotless. Finally, it is time for bed. You are settled in by a servant, surrounded by heavy drapes, and fall asleep to the distant sound of your investments generating more returns. Tomorrow you will perform the whole ritual again, provided you survive the ordeal of breakfast. Your bedroom is less of a room and more of a sanctuary. It is so huge it echoes even with the thick carpets and enough heavy fabric for a small military unit. The large bed frame looms in the centre, covered in layer upon layer of the most luxurious materials, silk coverings, and a ridiculous quantity of cushions. You could easily get lost in there, literally. Word has it, a distant family member once disappeared somewhere between the feather bedding and the personalised back pillow. The air smells slightly of flower essence, wax, wood polish, and just a faint hint of the day's successes and minor social failures. The fireplace gently burns, never too hot, never too cool, and always tended to by a servant who times her entry so precisely you suspect she might be part feline. There is a quiet tap at the door. Your personal attendant appears carrying a pan to warm the bed, a final drink to restore you, and perhaps a small accepting look at the condition of your soft shoes. They fix the window coverings just right. They fluff the pillows just so. The whole ceremony is so refined, so flawlessly executed, that you are almost persuaded you deserve all this fuss. You change into your sleeping garments, which have naturally been warmed near the fire, sewn by hand, and feature a stitch symbol, just in case you forget your name entirely. In the middle of the night, there are soft shoes for getting into the bed and different soft shoes for getting out. Someone brings you a container of hot water for warmth. Another person brings you a book opened to the correct page, though you never actually read it because the words gently blur as your eyes get heavy. Some evenings you ask for a story, not because of the plot. Goodness forbid you feel any emotion at this hour, but for the comforting rhythm of another person's voice, perhaps a recap of the day's weather, or a quick summary of the newest social incident delivered in a low voice so the curtains aren't offended. Your mind begins to wander, carried away on a cushion of high-end comfort and forgotten conversations. What exactly did Lady Ashcroft mean about the broth? Did you ever actually write back to that letter from your lawyer? Did you select the correct headwear for the carriage ride? Or have you condemned yourself to being out of style until the next fall? Outside, the city is silent, at least in this part of town. Occasionally the soft sound of a carriage passing by, the quiet breeze through the garden, or the muffled call of an awake night bird, all remind us that while the rest of the world keeps moving, your world has, only for the night, slowed down and softened. Your assets may be working tirelessly, but you do not have to move a single finger. You lean back, sinking into the mattress, feeling the cool touch of silk on your face and the gentle weight of coverings that cost more than most small houses. Somewhere in the estate, someone puts out the last lamp. Someone else checks all the entryway locks. Someone else is already preparing your morning beverage. You start to drift. You float easily. You release the endless stream of manners, social appointments, and ridiculous hats. Tomorrow you will do it all again. The dressing up, the formal dining, the delightful and unnecessary demonstrations of wealth. But for now you are wrapped in luxury, safely protected by the high-end comfort of an era that, despite its many absurdities and hardships, understood how to conclude a day with great flair. Good night, sleep soundly. And if you dream, may your dreams be as soft, as silly, and as richly decorated as everything else in your existence. Why, you're not truly part of the upper class in 1900s London unless you possess at least one creature that could theoretically consume the neighbours. Small dogs, fluffy spaniels, and the occasional pet ape roam your carpeted hallways, each with their own personal helper, specific dietary needs, and probably a more active social schedule than yours. You certainly don't clean up after them. Someone is paid to handle that mess. And you avoid asking any questions about the floor stains. If the animal misbehaves during afternoon tea, you simply purchase a fancier collar for it and blame your butler. Owning an animal is not about emotional attachment. It is about social standing. It is about being able to say without a hint of irony, "Oh, that is Bartholomew. He consumes only certain bird meat and sometimes parts of the delivery person." The right animal signals refined taste, affluence, and a healthy lack of concern for natural limits. Of course, anyone can have a typical dog, but can your dog repeat French commands and wear a necktie made of silk simultaneously? No, unfortunately. Small, wheezing dogs are common, resting comfortably on laps the size of small benches. Fluffy spaniels are stylish accessories, carefully brushed until they resemble overly excited white balls. If you're genuinely progressive, maybe you keep a primate because nothing says I have too much free time and disposable money like property damage caused by a small monkey. Parrots are valued for their ability to repeat words, but also for their tendency to shout out loudly at the exact moment someone mentions a less than flattering family secret. One family member keeps a turtle, supposedly for its wisdom, but mainly because it is less likely to be misplaced during a large gathering. Rare tropical birds fly freely through the glassed-in rooms. Cats sleep soundly on extremely expensive floor coverings. Ferrets, for reasons nobody recalls, are considered amusing as long as they don't get loose during the evening meal. Naturally, each creature must have its own dedicated human staff member. The dog has a valet whose job is washing, grooming, and making sure it doesn't try to eat the family tableware again. The cat has a maid who lives in a constant state of mild dread, tasked with making sure the cushions are always the perfect level of plump. The primate has its own collection of outfits, primarily small hats, and a caregiver whose job description is simply good luck. Mealtime is a complex operation. The small dog eats only cooked chicken, never red meat. The parrot receives slices of fresh fruit cut to precise measurements. The primate enjoys a morning meal of eggs, cooked bread, and one time an entire can of expensive fish eggs, followed by a talk about proper manners. Your animals eat better than most of the lower classes and have stronger views on how a table should be set. Physical activity is important. You do not walk your animal. You parade it, ideally in the largest park, accompanied by a servant wearing coordinated colours. A large bird struts across the lawn, intimidating smaller pets and sometimes visiting guests. You once attempted to walk the turtle on a leash, but it organised an escape so slow and intentional you are still not sure it has reached its destination. Animal misbehaviour is never the creature's fault. If the parrot speaks ill of the priest, you blame the groundskeeper. If the dog chews on an expensive shoe, the butler should have predicted it. If the monkey runs off with the serving utensils, it is clearly a sign that the dinner lasted too long. Pet memorial services are lavish occasions, often with more attendees than your most recent birthday celebration. Small decorated boxes, arrangements of purple flowers, a poem read by the head housekeeper, who always disliked the animal anyway. The sadness is for show, but genuine, especially if the next fashionable animal trend is unavailable until the next holiday. In the end, your collection of animals is a mirror of your household, messy, carefully chosen, and a bit too quirky for total comfort. You care for your animals in your own specific way. Or at least you appreciate the feeling of being someone who can afford to lavish attention on animals extravagantly. As you start to doze, soothed by the faint whimpering of your dog and the distant screech of a monkey who found the alcohol cabinet, you admire your strange legacy. After all, historians may judge you by your finances, your inherited titles, and your wild social gatherings, but your pets, they will only remember you for the special treats. Now snuggle up beneath your fine covers, secure in the knowledge that somewhere in your huge house at least one creature is planning some minor mischief, and that truly is the definitive sign of a high-status life. School is not a place you attend. It is a service that is brought to your home, ideally by a French-speaking teacher with a demanding look that could curdle milk. The young people spend their days learning classical languages, the correct way to bend at the knee, and why it is impolite to acknowledge the existence of a major city. Being truly literate is optional, as long as you can recite some poetry and properly fold a cloth napkin into a decorative bird. Education for the wealthiest is less about useful skills, and more about fostering the kind of well-mannered confusion that ensures future employment for your staff. Classes start before the morning meal, not with math problems or simple spelling, but with speech drills and something called moral correctness, which primarily involves looking disapprovingly at the room's decoration and memorizing the family's formal saying. The teacher arrives precisely on time, prepared with an umbrella, a stack of old textbooks, and a heavy cloud of strong scent that could be used as a weapon. Her voice is clear, her strictness is famous. She has on several occasions managed to subdue a titled nobleman with only a raised eyebrow and the threat of extra language studies. The day's required subjects are a confusing mix of old languages, European history, proper manners, and that most essential skill for the upper class, how to keep up casual conversation while eating a difficult vegetable. You are tested on the names of capital cities, made to translate a classical author before your morning drink, and occasionally tested on your ability to perform a simple bow or curtsy without falling. Failing is not permitted. It is an automatic invitation for more drills. Art and musical training are considered essential for refinement. You might spend many hours hunched over an instrument, desperately trying to recall the composer's name, while your instructor frowns at your hands as if they have personally offended the monarchy. Drawing instruction focuses on appropriate subjects, flowers, arrangements of inanimate objects, and occasionally dark landscapes subtly intended to criticize your lack of inner turmoil. Physical training exists, but only in the sense that you are required to take a walk in the garden without tripping over your own feet. A popular sport is tolerated, archery is respected, and anything that causes sweat is gently redirected toward the servant class. There are private instructors, of course. For mathematics, there is a man with unkempt hair who smells of ink and disappointment. For sword fighting, a former military officer with a limp and strong opinions about foreigners. For modern speech, a foreign woman who despairs over your accent and complains about it to your mother over an alcoholic drink. And then there is the infamous finishing period for young women, the never-ending stream of dance lessons, voice lessons, and strategic quiet sighs. Young women are expected to dance gracefully, paint with watercolours, and speak 3 languages, at least one of which should be appropriate for making subtle threats at a formal outdoor gathering. Young men, meanwhile, are taught the correct way to shake hands, how to wear a small glass in their eye without reacting, and how to lose money gracefully while playing cards. Every minute is accounted for. Unscheduled time is viewed with suspicion. If you finish a task early, you are given extra writing practice or sent to copy stories with moral lessons by candlelight. There is always a governess, a tutor, or a watching relative nearby, ready to jump on any sign of inactivity with an urgent suggestion to recite a poem about the great successes of the country. Yet despite this strict routine, you eventually enter adult society equipped with the kind of self-assurance that can only come from never being truly challenged. You can quote classical writers, discuss a well-known historical conflict, and set a formal table while blindfolded. You may not know how to combine small numbers, but you can certainly propose a toast to the sovereign in flawless foreign language. And so, as the day ends and your governess goes to her own bare accommodations, you relax, admire your flawlessly folded napkin swan, and consider the many ways your education has prepared you for a life of unearned confidence. Tomorrow there will be more teaching, more classical language, more decorative sewing, more learning to act like you have always known the answer, even when you are completely lost, because that truly is the definitive sign of a good education. When the air quality in the capital gets so heavy your wealth can't even cut through it, it is time for a trip to another country. Southern Europe, the Mediterranean, North Africa. Just select a place where everyone else with a large inheritance is already relaxing. You bring a dozen suitcases, a personal cook, and the vague hope that you will return with enough colour for people to notice. But not so much colour, they think you actually spent time under the sun. Because for the wealthy of the early 1900s, going on vacation is not about new experiences. It is about your regular routine performed in a different climate, under slightly more elaborate light fixtures. You do not travel to experience the world. You travel to rebuild your usual living space, somewhere with a slightly nicer vista and hopefully less dampness. Getting ready for your getaway is a whole story in itself. Luggage is measured in large dimensions, not by the number of bags. You pack everything possible, 3 fancy dresses for every evening meal, 2 different hats for every outing, and enough fancy hairbrushes to open a shop on the coast. Your cook demands to bring his own set of knives. Your personal assistant packs a separate container just for shoe polishing materials. The children bring their teacher, their nurse, and at least 2 containers of academic materials that will never be used. The actual journey starts in suitably lavish style, of course. If you are heading to the mainland of Europe, you travel on a large ship, waving at the less fortunate from your luxury cabin and occasionally complaining that the sea air is not as invigorating as advertised. If you are truly adventurous, you might take the train all the way to a city with canals, where the waterways are charming, the old buildings grand, and the local boat drivers fully prepared to overcharge you. Upon arrival, your large hotel suite is perfectly prepared. It features English newspapers, imported tea leaves, and a staff who have learned to respond to your name in 3 different languages. You admire the local architecture, which looks exactly like the drawings in your father's library, and you nod politely at the other families also escaping to the exact same hotel. Days are spent touring ancient structures, churches, and art collections, all at a quick, respectful speed. You do not want to get sweaty. You pose for a few quick drawings, offer slight compliments to the local artwork, and always make sure to compare everything negatively to your home country. Yes, it is attractive, but of course our roses are superior. Meals are an unexpected challenge in getting used to local ways. Your cook tries desperately to find a specific type of English condiment in an African city. The children refuse to eat anything that has not been boiled until it is nearly inedible. The adults sample a suspiciously soft cheese, declare it highly unique, and quietly order roasted meat from the hotel's English menu. You attend social events with other travellers, dancing beneath palm fronds or classical art, all while discussing the odd behaviour of foreign people in low tones, just loud enough to be accidentally overheard. You buy small gifts you will never actually use and perfect the ability of acting interested in local customs. There is always a small emergency, a lost suitcase, a mild skin burn, a poorly translated menu choice that turns out to be animal brain. But these are accepted as the cost of experiencing culture. You write back home on expensive paper about the amazing environment, making sure to mention you saw a real ancient structure or a painting by someone you believe to be important. By the conclusion of the trip, you are ready to return to your home city, lightly tanned, but only just a little. Armed with stories of your time abroad that are really just stories about your own ability to bounce back, surviving without your preferred beverage, your usual furniture maker, and the comforting familiarity of the local atmosphere. You arrive back home just in time for the next social season, relieved to be back in a country where everyone understands how to properly toast bread. So tonight, let the soft noise of distant waves, or possibly your neighbour's large turtle gently snoring, help you fall asleep, dreaming of faraway locations, familiar routines, and a vacation that looks strangely like your regular life, only with slightly better souvenirs. So tonight, as you pull your own blankets around you, hopefully free of biting insects, overly critical staff members, and the risk of being overshadowed by a relative's hat, take a moment to appreciate the peculiar benefit of current comfort. Because for all their silk fabrics, precious stones, and expensive gold toilet accessories, the extremely wealthy of early 1900s London lived lives that were equal parts glamorous and totally exhausting. Under the decorated ceilings and never-ending trays of drinks, every single day was a demanding performance of proper behaviour, excessive spending, and a faint feeling of dread about existence. You survived another day of being pampered, adorned with powder, and politely observed by a large group of servants. You braved the dangerous maze of social gatherings, the unwritten rules of dinner utensils, and a medical system that still thought bloodletting was a smart way to invest. You were seen at all the important locations, wore footwear you could not comfortably walk in, and managed to avoid any social embarrassment, barely. And after all that, you still required someone to tuck you in and adjust the timekeeping devices. But beneath all the show and display, there is a lesson as soft as feathers and as sharp as a heavily starched collar. No amount of money could truly shield anyone from the unpredictable nature of life, the high expectations of others, or the embarrassing family portraits. Life in 1900s London was remarkable, illogical, and, if you were fortunate, only mildly dangerous to your well-being. The rich were not immune to boredom, loneliness, or the persistent question, why is the warm liquid always cold by the time it gets to the table? So, as you make yourself comfortable tonight, perhaps whisper a quiet thanks for controlled indoor temperature, proper dental care, and the amazing ability to quickly warm up old food in a machine, not over a copper stove. Remember that you do not need a fancy reception room, a pet primate, or a personal attendant to be living comfortably. Sometimes it is simply about having a clean place to sleep, quietness, and the soft sound of a fan moving air in the darkness. Because history, despite all its shine, is mainly proof that people are tough, a little bit silly, and always looking for comfort in a confusing world. Rest well, sleep soundly, and if you dream of fortunes, may your wealth include indoor plumbing and a distinct lack of required social activities. Good night, and thank you for your attention.